In today's video, let's go ahead and take a look at the entire card as of right now for AEW WrestleDream 2024. What's going on, pro wrestling fans? My name is Jose Ramos Jr. Welcome back to the J area. And as I said, we're going to take a look at each of these matches, take a look at how AEW has built them up, and share our predictions as to who will win each contest. And obviously, if you haven't subscribed to the channel just yet, make sure you do so. Turn on those notifications to follow up on all the pro wrestling content that is produced on this channel. And with all that being said, let's jump right into the very first matchup here. It's the Ring of Honor World Champion Mark Briscoe defending his title against the Learning Tree Chris Jericho. This feud has really heated up in the last couple of weeks in terms of their television product. We know that the conglomeration and the Learning Tree have had their differences, and it all centers around now between Briscoe and Jericho ever since Jericho made those comments regarding Mark Briscoe not being as good as his brother Jay Briscoe. This is an interesting story here because I look at the way they've been building Chris Jericho and the whole Learning Tree persona. One of the biggest gripes and complaints about Chris Jericho is that whenever there is a storyline that is devised on TV, it tends to take up a lot of time, not only TV time, funny enough, as his segment goes on AEW TV, but also in terms of the value in the opponent that Jericho is attached with. Look no further than his feud with Hook. He and Hook had battled for the better part of 5 months, and I saw somewhere that someone had commented, how ironic is it that Chris Jericho had a 5-month feud with Hook. Hook wins the feud, retires the FTW Championship, which was the main reason they were competing against each other, and Hook is left off of WrestleDream, and here's Chris Jericho getting a world title match against Mark Briscoe. Now, I will say, Mark Briscoe, I think, is a perfect champion for Ring of Honor. He is a defining member of that roster, but looking at how everything's been set up and looking at the track record of AEW, don't be surprised if Chris Jericho actually wins his 9th world title, going by that new name El Nueve, which I feel like isn't an accident. Anytime he introduces a new moniker, a new nickname, they try to capitalize on it. Chris Jericho is the king of reinventing himself. I'm going to go with Chris Jericho here to defeat Mark Briscoe for the Ring of Honor Championship. Moving on from that, another low-profile rivalry that has been building up on AEW. Rather, really, it's only been the last couple weeks, but we just got the announcement that Mordos, the Beast Mordos, will be taking on Hologram in a 2 out of 3 falls matchup. This match, although it lacks some storytelling, I'm looking forward to because of the athleticism of both participants. Mordos and Hologram, although not consistently presented in these big storylines, these meaningful storylines, they maximize their minutes in the ring. They have proven to be two of the best in-ring competitors that the AEW roster presently has. With that being said, of course, given that Mordos and it looks like Roosh are part of the now Jake Roberts association there, and then we have Hologram, who had a great matchup against Commander this past week on Dynamite. I think I'm going to rock with the babyface here. I think Hologram gets the win. AEW can be very unpredictable in this sense. I feel like somehow Hologram gets the win over here. There's still going to be some rivalry between the two, but I wouldn't be surprised Hologram going out on top. Now, next, we also have a new matchup that has just been announced on AEW Dynamite. We have the Hangman Adam Page versus Switchblade Jay White. This is a storyline that, again, hasn't really been built up over the course of a long time. That's one complaint I will say I do have with AEW. I feel like the majority of their matches come together for the sake of the match. Then that's not necessarily a bad thing. That's why we have these alternatives. The WWE is very heavy on its storylines. The AEW product is very heavy on their in-ring product, and that's okay. But in the sense of a storyline, don't look for this to be something well thought out, in-depth, again, narrative-based. Look for the in-ring aspect. Hangman Adam Page and Jay White should go on to have a great matchup. I think it has the potential to be one of those matches of the night, kind of a caliber matchup. With that being said, Hangman Adam Page's character has been very divisive as of late. I personally enjoy this deranged, crazed Adam Page. I think the more stress and trauma that they put him through makes him more interesting. With that being said, he did get a win at All Out against Swerve Strickland in the cage match. Jay White is just returning. My pro wrestling inclinations lead me to believe that we're going to give the returning star Jay White this win just to start building him up. I don't think it's going to be a one-off. I do anticipate maybe a rematch between the two, but for the case being, I think we're going to go Jay White to win against Hangman Adam Page. And another matchup here that's not contested for any titles, rather is a grudge match. And this is the kind of match I'm looking forward to. One is two competitors who have a grudge against one another, but it's also been stretched out over the course of really years. And I'm talking about Darby Allin versus Brody King. If you see on the internet how they've been building this matchup, for the better part of the year, we would have interactions between the two, whether it's at Comic-Con, whether it's at a party, whether it's in public. There's always interaction, a concert even. Whether there's in public, there's always interaction between the two. Darby Allin issues an open challenge here at WrestleDream, and who would answer the call? Brody King. The contrast in styles should make for a tremendous matchup. Darby Allin, who was no stranger to throwing caution to the wind and doing all these daredevil acts, and then Brody King just being a strong presence in the ring. I think these are two individuals whose styles mesh well together. It is no secret they are friends in real life, and it tends to be that those who are close friends in real life tend to have the best matches. Now, I will say I'm a little upset here for Darby Allin because he was in line for a championship. They took it away and they gave it to Jon Moxley, which we'll get to in a moment. So, in order to keep this momentum going, I think Darby Allin gets the victory. He defeats Brody King and finally begins this ascension to the main event spot, and maybe even within the next few months, a world title reign. But that's for the future. We're talking about WrestleDream here, and we're talking about championships. Let's talk about the TNT Championship as Jack Perry, the scapegoat, defends his title against Shibata. Again, another storyline where we're involving two highly, I don't want to say decorated wrestlers, but it should be a matchup that is good. Shibata is great. Jack Perry is starting to lean in the direction of being great. I think in terms of his heel work, it's really elevated itself. I think ever since his return from Japan, Jack Perry has managed to carve himself a valuable spot on the roster. He's under the wings of the Elite, which isn't a bad place to be, certainly being that they are one of the EVPs in AEW. I think Jack Perry and Shibata should have a good matchup here. What I do like is we're already teasing something to the future, whereas a guy like Danny Garcia will be targeting a championship, and it looks like this might be the title. Shibata, who had hinted on this past week's Dynamite that, hey, when I win the AEW TNT title, Garcia is basically going to be one of the main guys, or one of the first guys, I should say, to get that title match. But I think that's supposed to be something to turn us, kind of trick us, if you will. I think Shibata loses this matchup. Jack Perry wins through some interference or whatever the case may be. This leads to Garcia wanting to avenge his friend Shibata, then leading into a Garcia versus Jack Perry matchup for the TNT title, and that is where I think a title change will happen. That is who I think will defeat Jack Perry, Danny Garcia. But again, that is towards the future. This is WrestleDream. I'm picking Jack Perry to win that matchup. And let's stick with the theme of titles, as the International Championship will be contested in a three-way. This, I know I talked about the Page and Jay White matchup that could be a match of the night caliber. This is the match that I think probably will end up being match of the night. With respect to the main event, this one I think has all the makings for match of the year caliber as well, because you have Will Ospreay defending his international championship against Ricochet, and on top of that you have Takeshita in a three-way matchup. Three uber athletic individuals who all have something to prove. This title has been associated with Will Ospreay since he won the title. He did lose it to MJF and regained it back at All In, and I honestly, this is a toss-up. This is a matchup where you could make an argument for anyone to win this championship. And typically what I like to do is upload these predictions to the pay-per-views after, Dynamite, after Raw, after whatever show is associated with the event, because you kind of get a sense for where the direction is going. Right now, Will Ospreay, I think his attention is on Don Callis. His attention is on the family. His attention's on the loyalty of Kyle Fletcher. You look at Ricochet, who I think is going to be a great part of this matchup, and to tell you the truth, he might be the guy taking the fall. But with that being said, I think I'm going to go with Takeshita here to win the International Championship, relieving Will Ospreay of his duties as champion so that he can move on to bigger and better things. Plus, it'd be a great opportunity for Takeshita to finally have a championship title reign to run with and maybe build up some momentum on his own, because he has been one of the consistent talents in AEW, even taking time away to going to Japan and again reinventing himself, rejuvenizing his energy here. I think this would be a great way to almost place a reset button for a guy like Takeshita. Again, we're talking about titles, so we're going to keep going here. Private Party, they will be challenging the Young Bucks for the tag titles. And what I don't want to say is random, but you look at the caliber of teams that the Young Bucks have been competing against in recent months, and I look at Private Party, and I like that they're elevating them. I like that they're giving them an opportunity here against the Elite. But part of me looks at it as like one of these things isn't like the other. What I do appreciate is the references to the early year of AEW. One of the first few episodes included a match between Private Party and the Young Bucks, where Private Party would emerge victorious, concluding with an upset against the Young Bucks. I think because of that, I think what we're doing here, and I think it's great, is trying to reevaluate the tag team division, trying to reestablish who were some top teams, who are some of the most over acts on the roster. But I got to tell you, I can't see Private Party defeating the Young Bucks. I think the Young Bucks are due to lose these tag team champions. I just don't think Private Party is the team to do so. Now, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they're going to cause a little bit of a swerve here and give the titles to Mark Quinn and Cassidy. But again, this is my predictions video, and I really struggle to see them losing the titles to Private Party. It should be a good matchup, but again, I don't know if this is going to be the night that they drop those titles. We move on to the women's division, where Mariah May will be defending her women's world title against Willow Nightingale. Ever since we had the matchup that was set between Willow and Britt Baker, that was going to be our number one contenders match to determine who would be the competitor against Mariah May here at WrestleDream. Unfortunately, Britt Baker fell ill and would not be able to compete in that matchup, so they made a four-way matchup that Willow Nightingale would actually emerge victorious. Now, I don't know what the original plan here was. Maybe Britt Baker was in line to get that title, but based off the reception of her matchup against Mercedes, the crowd's kind of falling sour on Britt Baker. I think she's one of the better wrestlers in the division, but in recent months, it just hasn't been the same. I'm wishing her the best, and hopefully that she can get back on track. But I think this is the better matchup here. Mariah May versus Willow Nightingale. Again, there's history here. They were the finals in the Owen Hart tournament. Willow Nightingale nearly going back to back. I think this was the better matchup here. I think it's going to be one of the top matches for the women's division in this last stretch here. I do see Mariah May winning, though. I don't see her dropping the title. I think it's too soon. But I'm looking for big things here for Willow Nightingale. I think sooner rather than later, we will see her with the world title around her waist. But we're talking about world titles, so let's move into our main event here. Being that it's in Washington, it's another one of those matchups where it's going to be hard to call. Bryan Danielson defends the AEW World Championship against Jon Moxley, former teammate in the Blackpool Combat Club, in what could very well be the last match in Bryan Danielson's AEW career. Now, if you go back to our prediction video for Allin, I had said if Bryan Danielson does win the World Championship, I could see him holding on to the title until WrestleDream, where he obviously would be competing in Washington. I thought it was going to be against a guy like Swerve or Darby Allin, who was in line for a title match because of that Washington connection. Obviously, that was not in the cards here for the event, because Moxley managed to finagle his way into the main event against Bryan Danielson. I talked about the triple threat match for the International Championship. This is another matchup that could be match of the night. So I'm stamping it right here. Between those two, the International and the World title, look for those matches to be match of the night. I do look forward to the Page versus Jay White matchup, but when it has a championship involved, it only elevates it even more. Right now, what I do is I go through my notes, and I try to think strategically and logically as to who wins what matchup. And I do that for every match. This matchup, I haven't really nailed a winner. I could see either one going over. I think in the sense that it being his hometown, his home state, I could see Bryan Danielson winning and losing. He could win because it's like this big, joyous moment for the crowd. Bryan continues on his journey as champion, or you can go home at home, and what a way to go out, right? Moxley, I think, is more than capable of being the individual to carry a company, to carry a championship, and to carry the prestige of the main event scene. I don't know if Darby Allin was ready for that. I personally think he is. I think Darby Allin is fantastic. I think it's high time that we give him a run at the World Championship. But this is how I'm seeing it. And let's get a little crazy. Bryan Danielson, I think, is one of the greatest wrestlers of all time. Certainly in my generation, being able to watch him grow from the early NXT days to present day. Unfortunately, I did not have access to Ring of Honor at that time, so I wasn't really exposed to Bryan Danielson pre-WWE, but over time, I've been able to go back into the archives and look at his previous matchups. I think this is the night that Bryan Danielson retires. I don't think there's enough built-up emotion for this like we saw with the Swerve Strickland matchup. I think it's been very under the radar. I think it's been very low-key, and I feel like that's how Bryan's going to want it. I think Bryan's going to want it to be a low-key thing. He's going to have a great match against Moxley. I could see Moxley winning the matchup, winning the championship, and then that leads to a program with Darby Allin, because Darby Allin had that match on lock. He was supposed to be the next contender, but he lost it to Moxley. So I think down the line, Moxley will defeat Bryan Danielson. He then will compete against Darby Allin. But the only question now is, where does Christian Cage fall? And Christian Cage has that contract that ensures him an opportunity at the World Championship whenever he chooses. A lot of moving variables here, but I think for the time being, Jon Moxley, I think this is it. I think Bryan Danielson goes down against Jon Moxley, closing another chapter on his career and retiring from the in-ring aspect of AEW. Surely he's not done with that company. I think he's going to end up being there for a very long time. But what do you guys think? Go ahead and sound off in the comments below. What is your prediction for AEW WrestleDream? Do you think this is it for Bryan Danielson? And if so, what were some of your favorite memories throughout his career? If you enjoyed this prediction video, please give the video a thumbs up. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the channel in order to keep up to date with all the pro wrestling content that I produce here on YouTube. And with that being said, of course, my name is Jose Ramos Jr. I'll see you guys next time, and enjoy AEW WrestleDream.